The morning bell at Roosevelt High School always rang with a metallic echo that seemed to vibrate through the entire building. For most teachers, it was just routine background noise. But for Emily Carter, 28 years old and barely 5 years into her career, that sound still sent a ripple of anticipation through her chest. She loved the energy that came when students shuffled into her classroom, half asleep, full of chatter, carrying the chaos of the city on their shoulders. Emily was the kind of teacher who leaned on desks, laughed with her students, and filled the whiteboard with colors and arrows until it looked more like a mural than a lesson plan. She wore her long brown hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and her expressive eyes carried warmth that made even the shyest kids feel noticed. Teaching wasn't simply a job to her. It was a mission, something deeply tied to her sense of who she was. But beneath the surface of her enthusiasm, she had begun to notice cracks, dark veins of corruption that ran through the school's foundations. At first, it was whispers among the parents, mandatory contributions for classroom renovations, even though those projects never seemed to materialize. Then it was rumors about budgets, money granted to the school for technology upgrades. But Emily still had a projector that flickered and died in the middle of her history lectures. Students sat in chairs with missing screws, desks carved with graffiti that had been there for years. Emily remembered one parent's frustrated sigh during a conference. "Ms. Carter, I don't mind donating, but when I see the principal driving a brand new Lexus while you're asking us to buy copy paper for the class." The words stuck with her, lodging like a thorn she couldn't shake. At first, she brushed it off. Maybe this is how the system works. Maybe every school has problems like this. Maybe I should just keep my head down and focus on my students. But silence was heavy, suffocating. Every day, Emily walked through the hallways and noticed the small injustices stacking up like dust on the windowsills. Teachers whispered in the staff lounge, their voices low, their eyes flicking toward the closed office doors. Some grumbled about missing funds. Others simply shrugged. "It's above our pay grade," one veteran teacher muttered, stirring sugar into her coffee with a weary hand. Emily wanted to scream, but she didn't. Not yet. Her apartment in Brooklyn was small, just 2 rooms, with peeling paint and a leaky faucet in the kitchen, but it was her safe space. At night, she often sat by the window, grading papers by the glow of the city lights outside. But lately, those nights were restless. She'd put her pen down, stare at the Manhattan skyline in the distance, and feel a knot forming in her stomach. The weight of what she knew, what she suspected, was pressing on her, demanding a voice. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday. The school board had promised scholarships for disadvantaged students, opportunities that meant the difference between mediocrity and a future. Emily had 2 students in her class who were top contenders: Daniel, a quiet boy whose single mother worked 3 jobs, and Maya, a girl with boundless energy, but parents who could barely afford rent. That afternoon, during a staff meeting, the principal casually announced that the scholarship funds had been reallocated to other school needs. His tone was dismissive, his eyes glued to the sheet of paper in front of him, as though it were a mere bureaucratic detail. The words hit Emily like a slap. Her mind screamed, "Other needs? What could possibly matter more than giving these kids a chance?" Later that day, Daniel lingered after class. His shoulders were hunched, his hands twisting the strap of his backpack. "Miss Carter," he whispered, his voice breaking, "does this mean I can't go to the program anymore?" Emily froze. His eyes, large, hopeful, now shimmering with tears, bore into her. She wanted to lie, to reassure him, to promise that everything would be fine. But the truth was sharp and unrelenting. She knelt to meet his gaze, placing a steady hand on his trembling shoulder. "I don't know yet, Daniel," she said softly, her own voice thick with emotion. "But I promise I'll do everything I can." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her tiny bedroom, listening to the hum of traffic outside, her thoughts a storm. Her chest tightened with guilt. She imagined Daniel's face, Maya's determination, the way their futures were being stolen by greed hidden behind bureaucratic words. Her mind spun with questions. If I stay silent, am I any better than them? What if I speak up? What happens then? Will I lose my job? My career? What will it cost me? Her fingers brushed against her lesson planner on the nightstand. Teaching had always been about more than textbooks. It was about protecting her students, giving them the tools and chances the world often tried to strip away. In the stillness of the early morning, as the city outside began to stir, Emily made a decision. Fear clawed at her throat, but something stronger burned inside her. If I don't stand up for them, who will? It was the beginning of a storm, one she could already feel gathering on the horizon. The fluorescent lights of the school auditorium buzzed faintly, blending with the restless murmurs of parents, teachers, and students. Emily Carter stood just off the stage, her palms pressed against the cold wooden railing, her heart hammering like a drum. She could feel every bead of sweat forming along her hairline, but she refused to wipe it away. She wanted to feel it, this tension, this raw pulse of fear and determination. It reminded her she was alive, that what she was about to do mattered. Her eyes scanned the crowd. Parents whispered to each other. Teachers shifted uneasily in their seats, some avoiding her gaze entirely. She noticed the principal, Mr. Harrison, sitting at the edge of the stage, his posture rigid, eyes flicking to her like a hawk measuring its prey. His assistant jotted notes obsessively, never lifting her gaze from the paper. They're ready to strike back. I have to be precise. I have to be fearless, Emily thought, feeling the weight of the room pressing down on her like a heavy fog. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, Emily stepped forward onto the stage. The wooden boards creaked beneath her shoes, each sound echoing through the silent auditorium. She approached the podium, brushing her fingers against the smooth, varnished surface, grounding herself. Every tiny detail was vivid. The scratch in the wood beneath her hand, the faint scent of old books and polished floors, the soft hum of the overhead lights. She cleared her throat, the sound harsh against the quiet, and looked up at the audience. I can't back down now. Not when they're counting on me. Good evening, she began, her voice steady, carrying both warmth and firmness. I'm Emily Carter, a history teacher here at Roosevelt High. I've been honored to work with incredible students, and I'm proud of what we accomplish every day. But I cannot stay silent anymore. Murmurs rippled through the room. Emily continued, her words measured, each sentence carefully chosen to convey truth without accusation, yet heavy with implication. I've become aware of practices that compromise the integrity of our school. Funds intended for educational programs have been redirected. Contributions from families have been mismanaged, and opportunities for our students have been unfairly restricted. She saw a few faces blanch, parents exchanging worried glances. Some teachers stiffened, but others nodded subtly, their eyes reflecting relief. Emily's gaze swept over Daniel and Maya in the front row. Their small nods gave her courage, a tether to reality beyond the fear. I understand that speaking out comes with risks, she said, her voice quieting, almost intimate. But my priority will always be our students. They deserve transparency, fairness, and a chance to thrive without the burden of corruption. A tense silence followed her words. Then, the principal's voice cut sharply through the air. Ms. Carter, this is highly inappropriate. The board has established procedures for addressing concerns, and public accusations are unprofessional. His tone was flat, but the underlying threat was clear. Back down or face consequences. Emily's pulse raced. She felt the familiar flutter in her stomach, the cold sweat at the back of her neck. Every instinct screamed to retreat before her voice could be silenced. Yet she remained rooted, a defiant figure in the glare of fluorescent lights. No, this isn't about me. This is about them. Daniel, Maya, every student whose potential is stolen by secrecy and greed. I'm aware of the procedures, Mr. Harrison, she replied, her tone calm but edged with steel. But when procedures fail our students, silence becomes complicity. I will not remain complicit. Whispers escalated into murmurs, some parents leaning forward, curiosity and concern blending on their faces. Emily felt the weight of their attention as a physical force, pushing against her chest, urging her to continue. Her inner thoughts spun rapidly. What if they fire me? What if they make an example of me? What if my career ends tonight? But she felt a quiet, insistent voice beneath the fear. If not now, when? She drew in a deep breath and pressed on. I'm requesting a full audit of school funds, complete transparency in every transaction, and immediate steps to restore fairness in our programs. Our students deserve nothing less. Her words hung in the air, a challenge, a call to action. The room remained silent for a beat longer than expected. Emily could feel her hands trembling slightly, the pulse in her temples thudding like a drum. Then the first claps began, not from the board but from the parents. A few hesitant, then louder, until a ripple of approval swept through the auditorium. Some teachers, emboldened, joined in. Mr. Harrison's face darkened. He opened his mouth, but Emily's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. Try to silence me, and you'll awaken more than my voice. As she stepped down from the podium, relief and adrenaline collided inside her. Her legs were weak, her palms slick, but the feeling of standing for what was right coursed through her veins like electricity. Parents approached her, murmuring thanks, some tearful, some outraged on her behalf. Daniel and Maya ran up, their small faces lit with admiration. "Thank you, Ms. Carter," Daniel whispered. I didn't know someone would fight for us." Emily knelt to their level, her chest tight with emotion. "I always will. Never doubt that." Backstage, the staff room was a flurry of whispered reactions. Some colleagues offered quiet congratulations. Others shot her wary glances. Emily knew the next few days would be difficult. Rumors would spread. Threats might come. But she felt a spark within her, a certainty she had never known. "I've begun something that cannot be undone," she thought, feeling the gravity of her choice. "I've taken the first step toward justice. And even if it costs me everything, it is worth it." As she walked out of the auditorium, the cold autumn air of New York greeted her. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the wind brush against her cheeks, the sound of distant traffic a reminder that life outside these walls continued. Yet, Emily felt a subtle shift inside herself. The fear was still there, lingering, but it had been tempered by courage, by the unyielding knowledge that she had done the right thing. This was only the beginning. The battle had just begun, and Emily Carter was ready to face it head-on, no matter the personal cost. The morning after Emily Carter's bold public stand, the atmosphere in Roosevelt High was thick with tension, like a storm cloud hanging low and ready to burst. She walked through the hallways, the familiar scent of polished floors and chalk dust mingling with something heavier. Anticipation, suspicion, unease. Students whispered her name in hushed tones as she passed, a mix of admiration and worry reflected in their eyes. Teachers avoided her gaze, some casting cautious glances from behind coffee mugs or stacks of papers. The ripple of yesterday hasn't faded. It's only growing, Emily thought, her fingers brushing against the cool surface of her classroom door, grounding herself in the tactile reality of her surroundings. She reached her classroom and set her bag down, the leather strap slightly stiff under her hands, the weight of books and lesson plans pressing against her shoulder. Her pulse still thrummed from the adrenaline of the previous night, and she could feel the residual tension lingering in her muscles, a reminder that courage often comes with a cost. She ran a hand through her chestnut hair, feeling the slight tension in her scalp, the subtle prickle of unease that clung to her skin like static. The first email arrived while she was setting up her desk. Subject: urgent. Meeting with Principal Harrison. The sender's tone was sterile, authoritative, dripping with quiet intimidation. Emily's stomach tightened, a familiar coil of anxiety and determination wrapping around her. Here it comes. The retaliation I expected. I knew this wouldn't be easy. She opened the email and skimmed the lines. An official reprimand for unprofessional conduct during yesterday's assembly, a stern warning about future actions, and a demand to explain her behavior in writing. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly as she formulated a response. She refused to let fear dictate her words, yet each keystroke carried the weight of potential consequences. By mid-morning, the principal's office was filled with a quiet but palpable hostility. Mr. Harrison's eyes, sharp and calculating, bore into Emily as she entered. His assistant lingered in the doorway, a silent observer. The air was cool but tense, every sound amplified. The distant hum of fluorescent lights, the faint rustle of papers, the creak of Emily's shoes on the polished floor. "Emily," Harrison began, his voice carefully measured, almost syrupy with forced calm. "Your actions yesterday were inappropriate. The board has expressed concern, and frankly, your behavior has caused significant disruption." He leaned back in his chair, hands steepled, eyes narrowing. Every movement deliberate, every gesture a test of Emily's composure. Emily's response was steady, her voice firm despite the rapid beating of her heart. "Mr. Harrison, my intention was never to disrupt, but to bring attention to systemic issues that affect the students directly. I cannot remain silent when they are being harmed." A flicker of irritation crossed Harrison's face. "You must understand, Emily, that there are protocols. There are proper channels for reporting concerns. Your choice to go public was reckless." Emily's fingers brushed the edge of her notebook, the textured paper grounding her in the tactile reality of the room. "Protocols haven't protected them. Procedures haven't prevented injustice. If I follow them blindly, nothing changes." He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry both exasperation and veiled threat. "I hope you realize the ramifications. Your career could be at risk." Emily met his gaze steadily, feeling the pulse of adrenaline sharpen her senses. The room seemed to shrink around her, walls pressing close, every shadow exaggerated. She felt the subtle vibrations of tension in the air, the unspoken words heavy like iron chains. "I knew the risk. I accept it." Outside the office, whispers followed her. Teachers muttered behind closed doors, some expressing support, others distaste. Emily could hear the subtle vibrations of fear and admiration intertwining, the social currents shifting with each step she took. She noticed Mrs. Parker, the veteran English teacher, giving a subtle nod of encouragement, a small but significant gesture of solidarity. By afternoon, a flurry of emails and calls arrived from parents, some expressing outrage, others gratitude. Emily felt the warmth of validation mixed with the chill of impending conflict. The contrast was dizzying, a complex dance of emotion she felt physically. Her stomach knotted, a flutter in her chest, a slight tension in her jaw. She inhaled deeply, letting the tactile sensation of the air fill her lungs, grounding herself amidst the emotional turbulence. Yet, the most unsettling moment came when a group of colleagues approached her, their expressions a mix of fear and caution. "Emily," whispered one teacher, eyes darting nervously, "you need to be careful. Some people are already talking to the board. They're looking for a reason to—" Her voice trailed off. Emily's response was measured, calm, but underneath simmered a fire. "I understand the risks, but I cannot stay silent. Our students' welfare outweighs my personal comfort." The day ended with a mandatory staff meeting, where Harrison reiterated the school's expectation of discretion and subtly threatened further disciplinary action. Emily sat through it, her hands folded on her lap, noting the subtle glances, the twitch of eyebrows, the stiffening of shoulders around her. Every gesture, every flicker of emotion told a story. She cataloged it internally, her mind a repository of information for the battles ahead. Walking home that evening, the New York streets buzzed with life, a chaotic symphony of car horns, footsteps, and distant sirens. The crisp autumn air brushed against her cheeks, a tactile reminder of the world beyond the school's walls. She felt the physical weight of exhaustion settling in, muscles tense from the day's confrontation. Yet beneath it all, a spark of determination burned brightly. Emily understood that her stand had set events in motion that could not be undone. The pressure was intensifying, the threats growing, and yet each challenge fortified her resolve. She touched the brass handle of her apartment door, feeling the cold metal beneath her fingers, a small anchor in the swirling storm of uncertainty. I've chosen this path. I will see it through, no matter the cost. The first wave of resistance had hit, and Emily Carter was ready to face it head-on. She knew that the days ahead would be filled with scrutiny, opposition, and perhaps betrayal. But she also knew that courage, once embraced, could ripple outward, touching those who believed in justice, inspiring a movement that extended far beyond the walls of Roosevelt High. The next morning, Emily Carter woke to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. The screen glowed with notifications, emails, and messages from numbers she didn't recognize, her heart skipping a beat. She reached for it, the smooth, cold surface of the glass pressing against her fingers, and saw the first headlines. Teacher's bold stand exposes school corruption, one read. Another, Emily Carter speaks out, a voice for the students. The words blurred for a moment as a rush of adrenaline and disbelief coursed through her body. They heard me. They actually heard me. Her fingers trembled slightly as she scrolled through the posts. Video clips from the assembly, uploaded by parents and students, had gone viral overnight. The recording showed her speaking with unwavering resolve, her chestnut hair slightly tousled, expressive brown eyes filled with conviction, voice steady yet charged with emotion. The camera caught every subtle inflection, every pause that underscored the weight of her words, the gentle gestures of her hands that punctuated her points. She could feel her own pulse as if echoing through the tiny speakers of her phone. In that moment, Emily felt a paradoxical mix of vulnerability and empowerment. The physical sensation of the world pressing in, the faint vibration of the phone, the cool sheets against her skin, reminded her that this was real. The ripple she had feared would isolate her instead connected her to an audience far beyond her classroom. I thought I might be alone, but they are with me. Meanwhile, the school was in upheaval. Teachers whispered behind closed doors, students crowded around screens, and parents flooded the administration with calls demanding accountability. Principal Harrison, usually unshakable, appeared flustered in the video conferences with the school board, his carefully crafted composure fraying at the edges. His hands twitched with irritation as he gestured, the subtle fidgeting betraying his anxiety. The tactile tension of the meeting, the crisp papers, the metallic click of pens, the scratch of shoes against polished floors, mirrored the intensity of the crisis. Emily herself was inundated with calls from journalists and advocacy groups. The touch of the phone in her hands, the weight of the device pressing into her palm, became a lifeline to the wider world. Each conversation carried the electric charge of opportunity and responsibility. She listened carefully, feeling the vibration of urgency in the room, the subtle thrill of influence, the almost tangible pressure of expectation. Her words are now dissected and analyzed, every nuance scrutinized. Social media threads buzzed with admiration, outrage, and debate. Emily felt the physical flutter of excitement and nerves coiling in her stomach, a visceral response to the intensity of the attention. She could almost hear the hum of energy, the electric current of collective consciousness connecting her voice to thousands of others. Even in the midst of recognition, the tension did not abate. Harrison summoned her again, this time via a virtual call, his face lit by the harsh glow of his office lights. "Emily, this is getting out of control," he said, voice clipped, trying to maintain authority. The slight tremor in his fingers as he adjusted his headset betrayed his anxiety. "You need to reconsider your actions. The school's reputation, your position, it's all at risk." Emily met his digital gaze, the pixelated reflection of his eyes like shards of glass. Her own eyes, clear and resolute, locked on the screen. "Mr. Harrison, what is at risk is the integrity of our school. The students' trust cannot be bought or ignored. If speaking the truth puts me at odds with the administration, so be it." As she spoke, Emily felt a subtle, almost electric rush, the tactile sense of conviction radiating through her body. The pulse in her veins quickened, her hands flexed unconsciously against her desk. "This is bigger than me. This is about justice, fairness, and the students who cannot speak for themselves. By midday, the story had spread to local news stations. Anchors recounted her courage, highlighting the systemic issues she had revealed. Parents called the school demanding reform. Students organized petitions, and advocacy groups offered support. Emily's name became synonymous with courage and honesty, and her words echoed far beyond the walls of Roosevelt High. Yet, the physical manifestations of pressure persisted. Emily felt the lingering tightness in her shoulders, the subtle ache in her lower back from long hours of sitting and speaking, the tingling sensation of adrenaline and nervous energy. Each sensation tied her to the reality of her actions and the consequences she would face. Despite the acclaim, the dangers remained. Harrison and certain board members still viewed her as a threat, plotting ways to undermine her credibility. Emily sensed it in the coldness of emails, the subtle avoidance in meetings, the silent calculations behind polite nods. Each micro-expression, each slight gesture, was a puzzle she analyzed, aware that her understanding of these nuances could determine her survival in the professional arena. But the wider world's response provided solace. Students sent notes of encouragement, parents left messages of gratitude, and a sense of community emerged. Emily felt the warmth of connection, the physical sensation of relief, and hope spreading through her chest. The energy in the air was palpable, a tactile reassurance that standing up for truth could indeed inspire change. That evening, Emily reflected on the whirlwind of the day. The city lights of New York shimmered through her apartment window, their reflection dancing on the glass, a mirror of the newfound attention. She closed her eyes, feeling the cool surface beneath her fingers, letting the sensations of the room ground her. I took a risk, and the world heard me. This is only the beginning. The viral moment had altered the trajectory of her life, intertwining courage with consequence, fame with responsibility. Emily Carter understood that the days ahead would demand resilience, strategy, and relentless dedication. But for the first time, she felt the exhilaration of empowerment and the undeniable truth that one voice, when raised with integrity, could ripple through a society that so often ignored honesty. The following morning, Emily Carter arrived at Roosevelt High School with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. The crisp air of early New York spring pressed against her cheeks as she walked through the school gates. The familiar scent of freshly waxed floors, chalk dust, and aged textbooks filling her senses. Her chestnut hair was pulled back neatly, the sharp lines of her navy blazer accentuating her posture, her expressive brown eyes scanning the school corridor with vigilance. Today, she knew, would be pivotal. Her phone buzzed intermittently, each vibration sending a subtle shiver through her arm. Messages of support poured in from parents, fellow educators, and advocacy groups. Each one, though digital and intangible, carried a tangible weight, a tactile reassurance that she was not alone in her struggle. She slipped it into her bag, grounding herself in the sensation of the smooth leather strap against her hand, drawing strength from the physical connection to her tools and the world outside her classroom. Inside the principal's office, a tense air lingered. Principal Harrison sat behind his massive oak desk, papers scattered before him, a faint line of sweat tracing his temple. Beside him, 3 members of the school board, stoic, imposing figures in dark suits, watched Emily's approach. Their gazes were calculating, their postures rigid, hands folded in ways that betrayed controlled impatience. Each gesture, from the tap of a fingernail against polished wood to the subtle tilt of a head, was laden with silent judgment. "Ms. Carter," Harrison began, his voice deceptively calm, "we need to discuss your actions yesterday. The media coverage, it has created quite a stir." His hands flexed on the desk, the tactile sensation of paper beneath his fingers betraying his underlying tension. "This could have been handled internally. You've circumvented protocol, and the board has concerns about your approach." Emily took a deep breath, feeling the smooth fabric of her blazer under her fingers, the weight of her presence anchoring her. Her pulse throbbed in her temples, a visceral reminder of the stakes. "Mr. Harrison," The issues I raise concern student welfare and ethical conduct. Protocol cannot excuse corruption or coercion. Her voice was steady, each word deliberate, but beneath the surface, a coil of anxiety pressed against her chest. They may try to intimidate me, but I will not falter. A board member, tall and stern, leaned forward, his fingers steepled. Ms. Carter, we are aware of your intentions, but the manner in which you expose these matters is disruptive. Parents are anxious, staff morale is affected. We must consider the stability of the school. The subtle scratch of his pen against paper, the faint creak of leather chairs, the smell of aged wood. All these physical sensations heightened the tension, making the room feel charged, almost electric. Emily met his gaze evenly, noticing the slight twitch in his left eye, the minuscule rise of an eyebrow, a silent indication of uncertainty. Stability built on concealment is not stability at all, she replied, the texture of her words resonating in the room as she paused for emphasis. Students deserve honesty. Teachers deserve transparency. The community deserves integrity. Each phrase was delivered with precision, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the desk, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath her fingers. Every gesture matters. Every micro-expression counts. Harrison exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. And what do you propose, Ms. Carter? That we overturn years of administrative decisions based on one viral video. His tone carried authority, yet beneath it, a crack of apprehension. Emily could almost feel the tension vibrating through the office, a palpable energy that wrapped around her, urging her to maintain composure. She straightened, feeling the weight of her stance, the firm grip of her shoes against the polished floor. No, I propose accountability. A transparent review of all financial and disciplinary actions. Independent audits. Policies that protect students and staff from coercion and misappropriation. Anything less would be a disservice to the very people this school exists to serve. Her chest rose and fell with deliberate rhythm, the tactile sense of control over her own body anchoring her resolve. The board members exchanged quick, silent glances, the subtle shifts of posture, crossed arms, and pursed lips conveying their unspoken deliberation. Emily noted every micro-movement, the brush of a finger against a suit sleeve, the tap of a heel against the floor, as if decoding a language of power and hesitation. Then Harrison leaned forward, voice dropping slightly. You do realize that your position here is at risk, Ms. Carter? Standing against the administration, even with public support, could lead to termination. Are you prepared for that? The chill of the question brushed against her, a physical sensation like wind cutting across bare skin. Emily's pulse quickened, her stomach tightening, yet a wave of clarity surged through her. She could feel her own heartbeat, steady and strong, resonating through her chest. Yes, she said simply, letting the word carry the weight of conviction. I am prepared to face any consequence, because compromising the truth is far greater a risk than losing my position. A long silence fell over the room. The physicality of it, the stillness, the barely perceptible hum of the HVAC, the faint rustle of papers, made each second stretch taut with anticipation. Then, slowly, a subtle shift occurred. The board members relaxed fractionally, Harrison exhaling, fingers unclenching. Emily sensed a change, a subtle acknowledgement that her stance could not be ignored. By the afternoon, whispers had spread throughout the school. Teachers began discussing the possibilities of audits. Students gathered in small groups expressing admiration and support, and parents inundated the office with calls demanding reform. Emily moved through the hallways, feeling the tactile brush of locker doors, the soft patter of footsteps on tile, the warmth of smiles and quiet nods from those who had previously only passed her in silence. Each touch, each gesture, resonated with the impact of her courage. That evening, Emily returned home, her body both exhausted and electrified. The tactile sensations of her apartment, the soft carpet under her feet, the smooth desk where she placed her laptop, the gentle press of the couch cushions, grounded her, as she reflected on the day. Every step, every word, every gesture mattered. And for the first time, it feels like change is possible. The confrontation had tested her limits, forcing Emily to measure every micro-expression, every nuance of speech, every tactile connection in the room. And though the battle was far from over, she knew the momentum had shifted. One voice, once thought powerless, had carved a space for accountability and reform. The following morning, the city of New York buzzed with a different rhythm, one that seemed to hum in sync with Emily Carter's own heartbeat. The spring air carried the scent of freshly bloomed cherry blossoms from Central Park, mingling with the crisp aroma of paper, ink, and coffee that marked her journey to Roosevelt High School. Emily, 28, young, resolute, with expressive brown eyes and long chestnut hair pulled neatly into a ponytail, walked with deliberate purpose, her dark navy blazer pressed and her posture unwavering. Today was the culmination of her struggle, a day where every micro-expression, every carefully measured word, every tactile gesture from past confrontations would converge into the recognition of her efforts. Inside the school lobby, a gathering of parents, teachers, and journalists had assembled. Cameras clicked, flashes punctuated the air, and microphones captured every sound of life and conversation. The tactile sensation of the cool metal railing beneath her hand grounded Emily as she approached the podium at the center of the room. Her pulse thrummed, the rhythm resonating through her fingertips and spreading like electricity across her spine. She could feel the weight of every eye on her, the soft murmur of anticipation brushing against her skin. Principal Harrison stepped forward, his usual composed demeanor replaced by a subtle tension. He offered a handshake, which Emily accepted, the smooth pressure of his grip tangible evidence of a tentative truce. "Ms. Carter," he began, his voice formal yet cautious, "I want to acknowledge the impact of your actions. The transparency and courage you displayed, it has catalyzed a wave of reform in our district." The words, though spoken with restraint, carried a tactile weight, pressing into the very fabric of the room as if the air itself recognized her achievement. Emily nodded, feeling the gentle scrape of the podium beneath her palms, the textured surface of polished wood grounding her. She allowed herself a measured inhale, letting the subtle chill of the room accentuate her focus. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady, articulate, resonating with sincerity. "This isn't just about me. It's about the students, teachers, and parents whose voices were overlooked. Today, transparency, integrity, and accountability are being recognized, and that's a victory for all of us." The room responded with applause, a cascade of sound that vibrated in Emily's chest, reverberated through the floor beneath her feet, and settled like a warm pressure across her shoulders. The tactile sensation of affirmation, the handshake of a supportive teacher, the brush of a parent's hand on her arm, the light tap of a colleague's notebook against her shoulder, connected her physically to the impact she had created. Each moment felt vividly, a chorus of emotional and sensory confirmation of her efforts. Journalists clamored forward, microphones thrust toward her, cameras capturing every angle. Emily's expressive eyes, the subtle lift of her brow, the firm set of her lips, all conveyed the complexity of her journey. Fear, tension, resolve, and finally, triumph. A reporter asked, "Ms. Carter, what motivated you to take such a stand despite the personal and professional risks?" Emily's fingers lightly brushed the edge of the podium as she composed her thoughts. "Integrity cannot be compromised," she said, each syllable deliberate, carrying a resonance that went beyond mere words. "I love my job, my students, and my community. But when corruption threatens the very foundation of what education should be, silence is complicity. I couldn't ignore that, and I refused to let fear dictate my actions." Her chestnut hair caught the ambient light of the room, casting a subtle glow across her face as she paused, letting the weight of her statement settle. Parents began to step forward, sharing brief anecdotes of how Emily's vigilance had safeguarded their children, each story a tactile brush against her consciousness, an invisible thread connecting her struggle to tangible human experience. Teachers offered quiet nods, colleagues exchanged subtle smiles of solidarity, and students, once hesitant, now beamed with pride, their applause echoing like a symphony of validation. Emily felt every heartbeat, every glance, every breath as if each were a tactile pulse in her own body. Later that afternoon, an official meeting convened with the school board. New policies were drafted, independent audits approved, and a culture of accountability formalized. Emily watched, the smooth weight of signed documents pressing into her hands, the firm texture of inked pens a tactile testament to the changes she had initiated. Every word, every signature, every nod of approval reverberated through her as proof that her stand had tangible outcomes, altering the very fabric of the institution she cherished. In the following days, the story spread nationally. Media coverage highlighted Emily's courage, her articulate advocacy, and the tangible reforms she had initiated. Viral videos of her speeches, moments of confrontation, and impassioned statements circulated across networks. Emily, walking through the bustling streets of Manhattan, felt the vibrancy of the city pulse against her skin. The wind brushing past her hair, the firm press of leather in her bag strap, the textured pavement beneath her heels, all reminders that her personal resolve had rippled into a collective awareness, a public acknowledgement of courage and integrity. One evening, as she returned home, Emily sat by her window, watching the sun dip below the skyline, casting a warm amber glow across the city. The tactile press of the wooden windowsill beneath her hands, the gentle hum of her apartment, the weight of her blazer draped over her chair, all grounded her in reality. She reflected on the journey, the fear, the uncertainty, the confrontations, the subtle micro-expressions, the tactile sensations, and the overwhelming human connections that had driven her forward. Courage, integrity, and accountability. These are not abstract concepts. They are lived experiences felt in every pulse, every touch, every breath. In that quiet moment, Emily felt the culmination of all she had endured. The school would continue, students would thrive, and her colleagues had been emboldened. Her voice had been heard, not just within the walls of Roosevelt High, but across a nation now aware of the importance of standing against injustice. Her struggle had become a narrative of resilience, of the power of individual action to effect systemic change. As night fell, Emily placed her hand over a letter she had received from the State Education Board, acknowledging her contributions and inviting her to participate in a national panel on educational reform. The tactile sensation of the envelope, the crispness of the paper, the smooth ink of the signature, all were symbols of recognition, tangible proof that integrity and courage had tangible rewards. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, the warmth of accomplishment spreading across her chest and settling in the pit of her stomach. Emily knew that her journey was far from over, that challenges would continue to emerge, that the delicate balance of education and ethics required constant vigilance. Yet she also knew, unequivocally, that one individual's stand, anchored in honesty, integrity, and the tactile, felt reality of human interaction, could catalyze change, inspire a community, and transform a system. And in that realization, she felt both peace and power.